Hello, everybody. Welcome to Game Audio Hour number 90. This is our weekly podcast where we discuss all things game audio, from creative ideas to latest techniques, project experiences to audio secrets. Here's where you find your in-depth coverage and opinions related to game audio. I did like 3/4 of that without looking. That's not bad for a year and a half
Very
of
nice.
memorization.
Maybe that could be a goal for episode 100. You could do the whole thing from memory.
100% for 100.
Oh my God, I could never get 100% through that. So, hey guys,
Yo.
I wanted to say hi to each of you. How you doing? How's it going, Alex? Let's start over there.
Well, I feel it's a bit of a solemn mood in the air today. Or the first few weeks of this year, we've seen a number of passings in the music world. I mean, I don't think we have to really start today's show with a special mention to the legend, the man David Bowie, of course, who passed away a few days ago. Have any of you guys picked up his last album?
Yeah, absolutely. And he released that. Was it last week? Was it less than 7 days ago when it came out officially?
It's like 3 days before his death, I think it was.
Yeah.
So I'll have to pick that up. But otherwise, I'm okay. It just sort of feels. It's funny when sort of these legends in music pass away, because you almost wonder why you feel a little bit sad yourself when you like. I don't know David Bowie, and of course I love his music and respect what he's done for us, and showing us that music can be high art and music can be progressive and can push the envelope, and it's okay, and it's somehow you sort of find yourself feeling a little bit sad, picked up in the mood, somehow, even though you didn't know him or anything. But anyway, I'm all right. How are you, Kyle?
Oh, I'm good. I was going to check with the other guys. Mike's right in the middle of my list. How you doing, Mike?
Well, I was fine, but after I listened to Alex, now I just feel depressed.
Sorry.
What's interesting is that I think we have a new metric of fame today, in that your fame is proportional to how long your death disrupts normal traffic on Facebook.
Yeah, right.
So I think Bowie took out the entire morning and early afternoon of discussions. I think that's pretty high on the fame-ometer.
Certainly. And Mike posted a really interesting thing about listing your 5 favorite Bowie songs. You got quite a list, Mike, on your Facebook feed?
I did. So what I was trying to do was get a better acquaintance with David Bowie's body of work, which is, for better or for worse, what we tend to do when an artist dies. We suddenly become curious, which is weird. We should maybe do this while they're alive. But for whatever reason, I decided I should see what the fuss is about, because I felt like I was acquainted with his pop hits, but not the body of work that really made him famous or made him seem really daring. So I just asked my friends on Facebook who are Bowie fans, can you just recommend your 5 favorite songs, or the 5 songs that you think best represent what makes him great? And I think if I were to concatenate all the recommendations that everyone posted, I would basically have everything David Bowie ever recorded. So in a way, it doesn't help. It's as if everyone just said, oh, just go listen to everything Bowie ever recorded. So I may have to do that.
Yeah, I thought it was funny that Matt, a mutual friend of ours, posted, just listen to the Low album, which has got 11 songs or something. But, close enough. Vince, how are you surviving this day? It bummed me out, too.
Yeah, it was pretty interesting. Just to try to be a little bit more uplifting. We did lose David Bowie to cancer, some form of cancer. But it also reminded me of something that happened last week. All throughout last week, if you're into video games and speed running, there is this whole charitable thing called Awesome Games Done Quick, where a bunch of gamers get together and they stream and show all the things that are possible, these crazy ways of performing video games where you can beat the Legend of Zelda in less than 15 minutes, and Zelda Ocarina of Time, the Nintendo 64, huge adventure game in less than 15 minutes, and wacky things like that with all sorts of games, adventure games, first-person shooters, whatnot. And it's all to raise charity for cancer research. And I thought that's really cool. I always enjoy seeing that. So besides the usual rigmarole of working and grinding away at projects last week. Had a lot of fun actually watching that and seeing all the cool things that gamers do with our games, and actually pushing themselves to show off what these games can do that the developers totally did not expect, and doing it to a good cause like cancer research. That's also really cool as well.
That's awesome. Yeah, and we lost Lemmy as well to cancer. I had a different reaction to Lemmy passing away. I mean, I was bummed, and during the Guitar Hero years he came by, but I was bummed on a different level because he represented kind of a more specific thing about rock and roll to me, like that kind of aggression and that really fast speed, and that just kind of like, I loved it. He would say, we're Motorhead, we play rock and roll, he would always say that, and it was very direct. That's what he was about. But yeah, with David Bowie, it's hitting me more. I think it's because I liked more of all the things that he kind of ventured into. Like, he didn't concentrate on just glam rock, and then he'd go over and he'd do some, electronic music and stuff, and work with Eno, who I love. And so it's kind of, I wonder if I'm proportionately sad because of how much he reached out beyond just one kind of area of music, and I loved all those things that he touched. So yeah, well, anyway, we're going to say our goodbyes a little later in the show, but yeah, we had to admit that there's a bit of a somber mood. I could feel it too. Just, it's just in the air. But it was a great drive home because I just cranked up Gene Genie and Suffragette City and all that stuff. Oh man, I love those songs. But before we get started, I want to say thank you to our sponsor, iZotope, for sponsoring the show, taking care of us. We're excited that next week, gentlemen, we are going to be hanging out at NAMM at the iZotope booth. So you might see us over there kibitzing and saying thank you in our own personal way, which for me just means you get like massive high fives or a big hug, whether you like it or not. So thank you, iZotope, for sponsoring the show. And going to our first topic, Alex gets credit for this topic. He's always coming up with intelligent things to talk about. It is workflow for sound design, how to imagine totally new sounds that have no reference.
Right. Yeah, so I'm doing a bullet hell game at the moment. I'm doing a bullet hell game called it's called Danmaku Unlimited 3. It's
wait. If it's unlimited, how is there 3 of them?
Well, that's a good question. I'll have to ask the developer about that.
That's an answer. Final Fantasy. Why are there 15 of them?
Yeah, 15th Final Fantasy.
Yeah, so I think often when we're doing sound design for projects, we're often you may have some reference like this needs to sound like that, or this is supposed to be, this animation looks like it should be doing this, so therefore that, and you can infer some kind of frame of reference for what something should sound like. There are certain situations where it could actually sound like absolutely anything. It could be absolutely anything, and there's nothing that you can draw from the game itself, or the context that it's in, or the animation, or how it looks, or the place in the game that actually could guide you in a certain direction to say, this is what it should sound like. So you have complete freedom, basically, to sculpt the audio identity of it however you want. So what do you do in a situation like that? Where do you even begin to sort of do you approach it from an emotional point of view? You want the user to feel like this, and so therefore it should sound like that, or what kind of techniques have you guys used before? This is a sound design question, but it can sort of be stretched to music as well. In Mike's case, perhaps maybe there could be a section of the game where there is absolutely nothing that you can draw upon from the game itself to direct you in what feel of music or what instrumentation to have for this specific application. I feel that this problem probably comes up more often with sound design than it does with music, but in those situations when you guys have total freedom, it's actually a very kind of a scary thing. It's like, well, I don't really know where to begin now. Where do I even start in creating, the reference to put the sound to? So, well, what do you guys do in those situations when you have just this gaping freedom where you can just do anything?
I was
so
thinking,
cool.
Yeah, Vince, I was going to go to you because, like, when you end up making a game and you've got some sound design to be done and it's something that's never been seen before, like floating people in a desert. How do you make, what do you do? What do you expect to hear?
Oh man, I mean, you can do anything. I mean, that's the thing. Typically, if it's early on, I've got all this freedom in the world. Then I'm like, I actually look within and say, what is it that I'm not good at? What is something that I want to explore that I can grow myself, and in growing myself, also grow the game that I'm working on? So, okay, I've never recorded this thing. I'm going to try driving over here and recording this area because I've never done that, and people tell me that I should do that. Um, I've never worked with this particular synth before, and I know that my friend has been bugging me to actually play around with it because he says that I should. I look at the gaping holes that are in my own knowledge. I say, can I do this? Because that is going to help inform something in the game. Because, okay, I don't know anything about that. Here's something else that I don't know anything about. And I think that there could possibly be an intersection there.
Wow,
Of course,
that...
it's a great way to go about doing things really early on in the project. Yeah, and obviously you can't do it all the time, especially when there's time pressure. But I love when there's so much space there because it's a huge opportunity for me to get better at something. That's always what I want to do.
Isn't that doesn't that get frustrating? Because not only do you have this big kind of ambiguous direction that you're trying to find, but if you're using software or techniques that you're not comfortable with, then isn't there a risk of sort of adding to the frustration of not knowing where you're going because the workflow is uncomfortable to you?
Well, I don't know. I personally really enjoy learning, whether it's very slow learning or very fast learning. If it feels like I'm just totally blocked, I'm not making any progress whatsoever. Like, oh, it's a whole day and no real assets. Nothing has resulted from this because some part of the synth is broken, or it turns out that I lost something, so I'm not making any sound whatsoever. But it's actually really rare that that happens. I find that if I'm doing something different, I don't even really have a reference for what is the wrong, horrible, worst case scenario even. And thus, I'm always coming away from it with something. So I've never really encountered that where working with a new technique, working in a space that I'm totally unfamiliar with, that even on the first day, I'm not learning something and taking something away from that that I can then put back into the game.
Interesting, because I think this this project that I'm doing at the moment, there's one or two particular sounds in it that sort of I've had this big creative block, and at the moment, as you said, just to sort of help myself learn, I'm trying to do the whole project in Logic. I used to use Logic a long time ago, and it's a very, very different way of working that I'm used to working, because I tend to do everything in archaic late 80s, early 90s style, as Michael will tell you all. But doing it in Logic this time has been refreshing. It's been interesting to sort of revisit Logic after about 10 years away from it and to see how it's come along. But I find myself sort of wondering whether I'm being frustrated because I can't come up with ideas, or because I'm using a workflow that's uncomfortable to me.
One thing I do, Alex, is I first look at the thing that has to be made. If it's like something that's got 4 legs and it walks on 4 legs, then I relate it to something similar. And if it's bipedal and it's a robot, and I relate it to something human. And so the first thing I do is I get the commonality layers down. And I know that this isn't the end result. I never show this to the end person and say, hey, what do you think of my robot? It sounds like a human walking across the floor. That's not fair, Because the hardest thing with sound design, in my opinion, is the fantasy element. And I don't mean sound design for fantasy, not sci-fi. I mean just fantasizing about what this thing could be, the imagination part of it. That's always the hardest part. The easiest thing for me to do is to get a robot cat, a robot jaguar or a tiger, and make it sound tigerish and have a tigerish growl. But because that's simple to do that, I do that first. I don't leave that out, because we do need to tie ourselves auditorily to this item through a familiar device. And so if we make a robot tiger sound like a flying spaceship, our brain just automatically goes, it's a little too creative. That might be what you hear from a producer. And so what I do is I get that mundane, obvious layer out of the way. And then that usually starts to speak to the more fantastic layer, the more imaginative layer that I put on top. And as it's kind of like a sediment. As I add imagination, I start to take out some of that mundane stuff, and then I add another idea for imagination. I take out more mundane stuff, and in the end, my goal is to have this completely imaginative sound that has this fine little filigree layer of recognizability, so that you can tell what it is that you're listening to. That's what I try to do. But I start right away by doing just the boring stuff.
Interesting. Do you find any parallels with writing music, Mike, when you're presented with, as Matt Ullman in the chat room put it, you staring into the abyss and the abyss is staring back at you? When you're in that situation, do you find any parallels there?
There might be an analogy to be made, though I think it's a loose analogy, because music obviously is not representational. It's not reflecting something that's physically happening in the world, and therefore it doesn't have that tight, meaningful connection to the visuals and the experience of the game itself. It's a narrative element. It's not a world or diegetic element. The only exception I can think of is, if you're in a tavern and there's a minstrel singing a song, then obviously that music is coming from the world in a literal sense, but otherwise the music is commenting on the world and thus doesn't have that same, there isn't an obligation towards realism. The closest thing I can think of is that obviously games tend to come in genres and music tends to embody certain genres that are associated with game genres. And there can sometimes be a question of mixing and matching genres to reflect a game that's not obviously one kind of game or another. If you're doing like a World War II shooter, there are certain parameters that are likely laid down for you, both by the amount of sound design going on and the level of energy you're trying to do, and the fact that it's World War II, so you probably don't want to have music that's too far out of that time because there's a sense of history. But sometimes you have a game that's more abstract, maybe a mobile game, maybe it's not taking place in any literal reality. And then you can have an interesting question of, well, where do I start? What's my basic palette? And usually in those situations, it's hard to come up with a heuristic that works for everybody. I think we just all carry our own associations musically. We might say, this game is kind of lighthearted. Maybe it would be fun to do super techno Western music, because that to me is kind of lighthearted but has an emotional core to it. We all have these crazy formulas that are strictly associational, that come from our autobiographical history and where we've heard styles of music and just how we respond to them. On a second prong on this topic, it's pretty rare that I have a game project where I have no constraints at all. Like, it's rare to have a game developer say, what do you think? It's usually like, here's the score we'd like you to imitate. Can you do this in your own voice? Or this is clearly, medieval people hacking each other to bits, so we'd like you to sound very much like game A, B, C, and D. So it's, I think it's kind of a nice problem to have unlimited creative freedom and to be able to have that question to ask yourself. I think it's actually, I've encountered it more often in film than with games. That kind of, where do I start? What's my basic instrumental palette question?
You bring up a good point, Mike, and we've brought it up before in the show. In my opinion, composing music is less creative than making sound design, because with sound design, no game wants to have their machine gun sound like the other game's machine gun. And so they kind of say, get away from that, do something completely different. And then with music, as Mike has alluded to, with composition, oftentimes there's some temp that you have to try. Give us your best, imitation of Enter Composer here that we've been listening to for 6 months. But that's its own creative challenge there, which the panel here has excelled at multiple times.
One interesting point, just to stretch out what you were saying there, Carl, that with music, I think that we're often more easily influenced by our own taste. Sound design, I think it's a bit more difficult to be influenced by taste because, unlike where somebody could say, oh, I really like, electronica, or I really like, rock and roll or whatever. It's a bit harder to say, oh, I really like this, hyper-realistic things from this sample library, or I really like, stuff recorded with this microphone, or, it's with sound design, it's a bit hard to sort of be influenced by your taste, which is a good thing, because it means that, ultimately, there is more freedom. It is also a bad thing because it means that, often I think when it comes to music, when it comes down to it, subconsciously, the judgments that we make for our choice of music in the games that we work on are going to be sort of somehow or other subconsciously influenced by our own taste. It brings up an interesting point about how to avoid being pulled around by your own tastes. And I think it's an interesting point. Yeah, you know where I'm going. I think it's an interesting point that, obviously we have styles of music that we're more comfortable in writing because we do it more often, we have more experience at it, we have more tools that are directed towards it, or we just generally like that kind of music. You may be a kind of, game audio composer who tends to be asked for a certain kind of music because that's what you're known for. But at the end of the day, when it comes down to sort of total freedom, it will sort of subconsciously sometimes come back to not only what you feel comfortable in producing, but also what you like to listen to, basically.
Yeah. Sean LaVale made a great comment in the chat earlier about having so much freedom. The first thing he tries to do is limit what he's going to, interact with. And I've done that too. I'll say, I'm going to create everything that I write on this is going to be done from this one synthesizer. And in the end, I find out that, it's really too limiting in some ways, or maybe I don't know how to run that MS-2000 so well that I can get all the sounds, the whole palette, breadth of sounds that I want to get out of it.
Yeah, I found exactly this problem with the game that I'm working on at the moment in the Vitae backroom is called The Modern Zombie Taxi Company. It's a PlayStation VR game that was announced at PSX a month ago. Yay! And with that game as well, when I started out, the rest of the team just said, well, we don't care, whatever you want, you just go for it. So it was new IP, and it's like it's a new genre, not genre, but it's a new medium because it's VR and it's just anything. You just go for it, do whatever you like. So it was really scary. So I thought, as Sean suggested, I thought, okay, maybe I'll start with some limitations. So I decided to do all of the sound design using only synthesizers, only synthesized sound effects, but trying to aim for sort of an intentional uncanny valley between synthesized but trying to be realistic but not quite there. So that sort of really odd, uncomfortable point in the middle. And like a year later now, after spending a year doing it this way, I kind of regret that decision because it slows things down a lot and makes things really difficult. And, people say, oh, we want the sound of a garage door opening. And so, anybody else would just go to the sound of a garage door opening. But no, because of this sort of thing that I did, and now there's this sort of obsessive side of me that wants to make sure that everything is consistent and done that way. So at the end of it, I can say, yes, it was all done with synthesizers, so eat it. But anyway, in terms of pulling taste out of the equation, one interesting thing that David Bowie used to do, in fact, he picked up a technique from an author who I forget the name of, where they would take strips of sentences, printed out, cut up words, and rearrange them on a table to basically pull himself, this is when he's writing lyrics, to sort of pull himself away from his own tendencies and his own habits with writing lyrics. Oh, there we go. Matt's just pointed. It was William S. Burroughs.
Wait a minute. Really?
What?
Really?
Burroughs did that?
I think so. Well, Matt Miller doesn't lie.
That'd be cool. Wow.
So basically, Brian Eno had a really good comment about what that the reason for that, and that's just simply that it's to remove your own bias and taste out of the equation. Is there a technique that we can use for applying this to music or sound design?
Ooh.
Can you restate what this means? Because I might have an answer for you.
This was the act of taking, somebody will need to correct me if I'm wrong here, but taking printed out sentences, cutting them up into chunks of words, and rearranging words on a table to sort of basically it's a form of randomization in a sense, to sort of randomize things a little bit.
Sorry, there are apps that do it now.
There's sort of a body of compositional technique that developed throughout the 20th century, really starting with Schoenberg and plummeting downwards from there, that introduced algorithmic elements into composition. And
hey, watch it. I love that stuff.
There's a lot of flavors of the same thing. I'm being a little facetious, but you can be as extreme as taking the 12 notes of the scale and saying, I'm going to randomly sort them and play through them all in that random order and never repeat one until I've gotten through them all. And you can use that kind of extreme, hardcore, algorithmic impetus in your music and then say, given that as a constraint, what can I do with rhythm? What can I do with combining these notes vertically to make some really crazy sonorities? And on the other end of systematicity, there's a body of stochastic composition where you try to introduce randomness at the performance level, where you can tell the musicians pick one of these 4 notes and just jam on it and do tricks like that to try to tap into musicality of other people, but constrain it in some similar way. So I think that like a lot of the composition techniques that emerged during the 20th century were in part an attempt to get away from everybody's habits, if you want to think of habits as the harmonic vocabulary of tonal music. And to bring it down to like a who cares level, I've actually found that tone rows are really cool when writing horror music. You can do some really gnarly things without having to freely associate gnarly sounds. You can take this extreme form of ordering and create interesting soundscapes that work really well if you're trying to freak people out. And outside of this extreme application, I think if you were very judicious in the balance between imposing that kind of mathematical order and keeping connected to your own intuitions and your own heart, you can get some cool results that get you out of your habits and out of your normal grooves.
One really simple application for music, really simple, that I often enjoy is just irregular time signatures. Really easy, but just such a quick and easy way to sort of rip yourself out of taste and your usual habits of operation. That's music though, but what about sound design? Because it strikes me that I think with music there is an element of improvisation that's often involved and experimentation, and with sound design often I feel that other than just taking your sample, mixing it around and putting it through loads of different kinds of funny effects until you find something that sounds good, are there any other techniques for sort of helping free yourself from your own tendencies and habits as a sound effects designer? Carl, what do you think?
Oh, I struggle with sounding ordinary, like I had just said. I've lost gigs because I put sound design together that was just ordinary and obvious, and that's the real challenge for sound design, which I feel I've done a good job at, and I've built a decent career doing, but I still will fall back, especially if I don't give myself enough time. I can only speak personally about this, but sometimes I'll run too close to the deadline for my sound designs, and therefore I default to what I already know. So to kind of add to your question, make sure you give yourself enough time, and then you give yourself your creative freedoms. And then once you have your creative freedoms, you can kind of, again, go off on these tangents and come up with some sort of algorithm of mystery so that you can come up with something that's completely unique. But I don't have a pattern that I go to because it's kind of defeats the purpose of being creative about it. So if I had something that I processed the same every time to be unique, then I would stop being unique because I'd be keep doing the same process every time. I also don't want to lean on, like, when I'm doing generative audio. I love that I can write these scripts to create all this crazy sounds, but if I start using the same scripts every time, then my generative audio is very predictable, which is the opposite of having generative audio. So it's very difficult to answer that question and say, if there's something that we do that is something we can do so that we will be beyond the stereotypical kind of predictable sounds.
Yeah, I always go back to the. I guess it really depends on what is the state of the game, but so much can be had from playing and watching the game. I'm thinking to an assignment that I often give my sound design students. I show them videos of games, which are typically action games, where there's a lot of stuff happening there. And I ask them two different questions. The first one is a very objective question. Tell me what are the actions that are happening in this video, which is played without sound, without music, and graph how often that thing actually occurs. So the idea here is that a game developer could tell a sound designer, hey, we want this gunshot, and this gunshot is going to be super awesome. It's going to be big. It's the hero, blah, 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 blah. And, that's cool and all, but should it be big if that gunshot is happening exactly 6 times a second? 6 times a second of absolutely huge is ridiculous. And I have students actually do that. They graph that. They graph how often enemies are spawned. They would graph, I don't know. I remember I showed them a video of Katamari Damacy and said, tell me, what is the rate of items being picked up? And how does that actually correlate with the design of the sound effect of an item being picked up? Because there's something very important there. It has to do with both the actual needs of the sound space that you're working in, as well as what the game player really cares to listen to at any given point in the game. And that leads to the second question, which is, if you're a game player playing this game, what do you want to listen to? And in that case, it's not about throwing away your taste, but actually embracing it. What is it that you want? What do you think is what you need as a player? What would you desire as a player to be that feedback? So
yeah, that's very true. In some ways, sound design is like that layered composition where you have the kind of mundane layer and a more excited layer and the boss battle layer, and you have to figure out what the focus of the game is going to be at that point. Of course, that's different for everybody. I remember working on a song when I was working at Neversoft, and I can remember the song. I'll think of it as I go on, but it was funny. It was a song that had like 7 different vocal lines all at the same time, and I found that a lot of people sang in their car a different line than I did. So when I note tracked it for the game, I came up with the line that I sing, but then I found my boss did not sing the same line, and he suggested that we kind of like get on the whiteboard and have people come in and test it and write down who was on what side. And when we got to the end, the way I had note tracked it won by only 1 point because and so many people sang this song. So we all hear the game differently, or we hear music differently than somebody else, especially when presented with a bunch of harmonies. And it was a song by a band in Seattle. I'll think of it. I can't think of it right now.
Sorry, guys. Got to head out early. See you next time.
See you, man. So that's a very good point. It's like, what, as a sound designer, you got to kind of determine what everybody else is going to find important to listen to, right, Vince?
Yeah, and it could be anything. And I think the really interesting thing is that the game will tell you something just as strongly, if not more strongly, than the developers might tell you. And sometimes the developers are actually really attuned to their game. Sometimes they actually are not. And many people actually don't realize this, developers themselves. They're so close to their game, they don't know what their game is saying. And it's actually a real skill as a video game developer, a programmer, a designer, an artist, to be able to constantly have an ear to the ground of the prototype that you're creating, of the beta that you're working towards, the vertical slice that you're pushing for. So, when you're a sound designer, either working in-house or you're contracted by developers or publishers that are in various stages, being able to balance listening to what they explicitly state versus what the game actually says is a real skill there.
Yeah, so true. Alice in Chains is the name of the band. I can't remember the song. It starts off with this drum doing this crazy like, and then like all these different vocal lines by Lane Staley. I can't remember what it's called, but that was a tough one. But hey, let's move on to the next subject. Unless you guys got one more thing you want to throw in.
Don't think so.
Alex hits us with a subject and then splits. Do you see that?
Oh well, it's all right.
Topic bandit.
I'm only saying that because he's not here. Damn you, Alex. The fancy accent and everything is gone. Now we sound like Americans. Before we had all this, culture because Alex was here saying things in a beautiful, beautiful language. So I wanted to take a moment and say thanks again to Isotope for sponsoring us. Check out their website. They've got some amazing deals. Get in on their advanced products if you can, because advanced products, Ozone, RX, they come with Insight. Insight is an application that I use every day. I leave that in my mastering bus. It is my way of seeing what's going on with LUFS. There's so many things built into Insight. It's amazing. If you've not used it, get the demo, check it out. I use it for my stereo field. I use it to make sure that I've got coherence for my, although I always use the wrong term for that, for my stereo field. I also use it for all of my meters, whether that be LUFS or peaks or RMS. It's a beautiful application where you can just adjust the windows, pull the ones in that you want to look at. You can look at so many different things. I'm going off on a tangent. But anyway, Insight, one of my favorite applications made by Isotope, our sponsor. Thank you very much. All right, guys, so the next thing we were going to talk about was to say goodbye to a few important people that passed away, all happening suddenly. And I know at the beginning of the show we already talked about Lemmy, and we've talked a little bit about David Bowie. But we lost a couple of more people, and I hate to butcher the name, but there's Pierre Boulez, I hope I said that right, and Brad Fuller from Atari. What did you say, Mike?
Oh, I was just going to say, I think this is one of those cases where it's not the French pronunciation that you expect. I think it actually is with a Z sound rather than Pierre Boulez.
Oh,
Yeah.
is it? Yep.
So because I think you're right.
Well, I thank Vince for that. I had to ask before the show because I've always, well, to be fair, I've known about Urcam as long as it's been around, but Pierre Boulez was not. I didn't realize that he was one of the originators. That's a pretty amazing thing. And Brad Fuller from Atari. It's just been a rough couple of weeks, losing some important people, not only in pro audio, but in game audio. And although I do hate that distinction because I think game audio is pro audio, but unfortunately it's the way that people do it. Guys, talk to me about some of the ways that these people influenced you. I mean, let's start with Brad Fuller at Atari. I mean, gosh, have you seen the list of games that he wrote music or sound design for?
Yeah, he was
I
pretty
have
much.
to say them. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say he's been pretty much working continuously ever since I was born. Right during that golden age of video games in the early '80s. And he actually, when people talk about video game sounds being blips and bloops, that whole thing, it's that horrible cliche of, hey, video game music and sounds are not just blips and bloops anymore. But he actually worked in that era of video game sounds being blips and bloops and was part of the transition from being blips and bloops into something more sophisticated. Like probably he's most well known for doing the music for Marble Madness. And actually that was the very first video game to use a full-on FM synth chip in it in order to drive the music and sound effects. He did a lot of stuff for Atari, not just the 80s, all the way through the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
He worked on some of my favorite games when I was going to arcades in the mid 90s, like
Yeah. He started in
Space
78
Lords
when
and
Corn
T
on.
Mech. Yeah,
Oh,
he
sorry.
was. Yeah, he was there for a long time, and I had a lot of fun actually playing many of the games that had his scores and sound effects. Space Lords was one of my favorites when I was a kid. T Mech, I was not even in high school when that came out, but yeah, I would sit down in that big tank simulator, and it was awesome. All the stuff that was happening there with sound and music, I
Yeah.
absolutely loved it.
But what's funny is Vince has named like some of the more, popular, but not like the massive things. You skipped
Oh,
Millipede,
oh yeah,
Gauntlet. I mean, come
Millipede.
on.
Yeah, certainly. Clax is huge. Yeah, I mean, I mentioned
Rampart. I
Marble
played the crap out of
Rampart.
Rampart.
Yeah. Man, Indiana Jones and the Temple of
Gosh.
Doom. Gauntlet 2. Holy, yeah. Let me just
Yeah.
break out the list. Let's see
Yeah.
here. You know,
Rampart
so
was so fun.
the arcade version of Tetris, Gauntlet 2, 720, APB, a lot of great Atari games. Cyberball, that's right.
Yeah. Cyberball. I just saw that.
Cyberball was a great game.
Check out
Uh,
this link that Matt Uhlman has put into the chat, and I will put into the show notes. It's again like Mike said, we keep appreciating people after they've passed away, and passing away is so definite. That's it. I sometimes forget that I'm now introduced to somebody who won't create anything new, and I feel some way, well, not in the case of Brad Fuller, but in some ways I feel ashamed of myself for not have been searching harder to find these people while they were still alive and recognize them for their talents. It's
yeah,
amazing. I mean,
kind of
what kind
take
of
it for
music?
granted.
I mean, he had so little to work with and pulled off something that was memorable. It's just amazing.
Yeah, and he was
I
still
was
working all the way up through the end of last year, and then
Oh,
yeah,
this cancer. This cancer.
yep.
It's like I'm from Long Island.
I'm looking
Yeah.
at I've been looking at Brad Fuller's credits, and I'm only personally familiar with a couple of these games, at least that I remember. I strangely remember playing APB in the arcade as a kid, but I couldn't tell you anything about the sound design. But Marble Madness has a fantastic score. I remember it being
Oh yeah.
really sophisticated in terms of polyphony and harmony, and it really did have this kind of crazy Alice in Wonderland feel to it that felt above what games were doing at the time.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah. This is a kind of a morbid question, but I think since we're kind of riffing, who are you going to be really? I mean, we've been heartbroken about so many people that have passed away. I'm not trying to make light of that, but there are some people that have touched me deeper about passing away, like Miles Davis, David Bowie, than others. And in the game industry, like I can think right now, off the top of my head, without any fail, two composers that when they pass away, I am going to be so bummed. Who's going to hit you hard, Vince?
Oh, you know what? I don't know. Um, it's really hard to say. I imagine it might not even be like the really great composers, which is not to say that the people I'm going to mention are like not great, but I think it will be different for me this time around because I've made friends with so many people over the years, and it's one thing to be, oh wow, Brad Fuller was awesome, and it'd
Yeah.
be another thing to say, oh, okay, let's just mention, uh, you know, Jake Kaufman.
Mm.
Jake Kaufman, he's wonderful composer. He definitely has his own style and fantastic technique. But the fact that he lives just a few miles away from me, and and we hang out every now and then, that's I think that would hit me far more than than other composers who are inarguably greater in their relationship to the game industry, like a Nobuo Uematsu or
Mm.
something like that. So uh, let's just say that I hope not to have to think about that anytime too soon. Even though I know it's inevitable, it can only be too hard.
Yeah, Mike, do you have a list of people that? I know this
Yeah,
is kind of a
I
morbid
pilot every
question.
day. No, what's weird about it is that game audio is much younger than, say, film or TV music. So there aren't as many kind of living legends from a long time ago. At least when you're our age, I tend to see most of the people in the business as colleagues,
Yeah,
even the ones I look up to and I admire. Whereas, like if you look at John Williams, I see there's sort of this giant gulf of years between myself and him. So I can say when John Williams dies, I'm going to be crushed because his music was so
Mm.
seminally
mm,
influential on me as a kid. But where game music is concerned, there's kind of like the very low tech stuff I experienced when I was a kid, and then there's fine work done by colleagues. And it's really weird to, I mean, Kyle, I'd be really upset if your ceiling caved in on you right now, and not just because of the show, but it's not the same as I was so bummed when Jerry Goldsmith died. It's a very different kind of
oh man,
experience.
Hmm.
I was bummed when Jerry Goldsmith passed away. Well, I made it a morbid thing, but to a point. Uh, I would give the two guys off the top of my head that really would get me, other than Vince and Mike and Alex, obviously, is I would definitely be bummed out if the Fat Man had any kind of health issues. I think I would absolutely give him a percentage of my bank account to keep him healthy. He should probably, well, don't call me right now, but call me later.
I totally
Careful,
There's
get
he
that.
some
may take you
Yes.
up on that.
there's some people that have influenced you so deeply that there's a fear that sits in the back of my head, and maybe it's just me. But so the reason I bring that up, and the other one is Michael Land, right, who did the dig,
Oh God, yeah. Yes,
right?
absolutely, Michael Land.
Oh my,
He I keep on yes, he is. I'm not sure if I would be where I am without Michael Land's contributions to
right?
LucasArts. And yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
So
I'm,
you see where I'm going with this. So what I'm saying is, and here's where this leads, this morbid Kyle way of delivering something, is find those people. Say how much they meant to you when you see them at GDC. I think, Mike, were you with me when I stopped the Fat Man to kind of give him my 5 minutes of, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, and his wife just said, his wife's like, we've got to get to this award show. Thank you very much. But what was amazing about the Fat Man is he actually stopped. He had this thing he had to go to. I had no idea, and he was so kind about my just blathering on about him, and he was so good with his time there. I couldn't thank him enough. I felt embarrassed, but I couldn't help myself when I walked 2 feet from him. What's amazing is at GDC, and I've never done this, and purely because I'm not brave enough to do it, he holds oftentimes a jam session at GDC where you can just go and jam with one of the greatest composers in video games, in my opinion. So this is what's great about video games is we can actually, like Mike said, we can connect with those people. They're right beside us. It's not like we're trying to go meet David Bowie at a convention. You know what I mean? And so take advantage of that and go up to these people and tell them how much they inspired you, because we are not promised tomorrow. So it's important to let those people know what they've meant to you today.
Mhm.
That's what I wanted to say on that subject.
Well
So
put.
Godspeed, David Bowie. Godspeed. Oh my goodness. You know, one we forgot to mention was Natalie Cole. I know we're a game
Oh
audio show,
yes.
but there's sometimes you just make moments first. Very special people. I listen to Nat King Cole stuff probably guaranteed once a month, if not once every week or every couple of weeks. I'll throw in a Nat King Cole record. And one of my favorites is what Natalie Cole released, where she was with her dad. That was amazing stuff, and it's very sad to see her go. So David Bowie, we lost Natalie Cole, we lost Lemmy, we lost Pierre Boulez. Did I say it right this time?
A little pretentiously, but yes. You don't have to do the French accent with it.
I know, right? And then we also lost Brad Fuller. We lost so many people. Very sad. But celebrate the people that are still with us, because they're still doing amazing things. With that, I wanted to move on to how much time we got left. Oh, we only got 9 minutes left. But this kind of, we were going to kind of morph. Oh, one thing I want to mention before I forget, and Vince brought this up, is you only have 2 days left to go to the Gang website, audiogang.org, and submit your nominations for the Gang Awards coming up at GDC. Have you guys ever been nominated for anything at GDC?
I have.
Yay!
Very
I'm sure
lucky
Mike
there.
has too. I probably kind of put you under the bus on that one. Sorry if I didn't mean it to. now that I mention it. Yeah, the Gang Awards are very fun. It's fun to go to the whole rigmarole. Although I remember one year I couldn't get in because I didn't have the right kind of pass. Now, have they made that available to Expo passes?
The Gang Awards, you mean?
Yeah, the Gang
I think they've
Awards.
changed it a little bit over the years. Like before, it would be held on different floors, and so you couldn't have access at a certain point. But I think the last year you could get in just without any issues with any sort of badge. I just had an Expo pass last year as well. So
And you got in?
yeah.
See, I do. That's a great topic for this last 9 minutes. Is what kind of pass to get to GDC? So I've done the whole pass, usually when somebody's paying for it, other than me. And I've done all the way down to the Expo Pass. I've done the audio track pass. And there was a year there where I didn't do the audio track because they didn't offer it. And that switched me to the Expo Pass. And I think that might have been the year I couldn't get into the Gang Awards, which I thought, oh, man, that sucks. What pass do you guys get when you go to GDC?
My strategy has changed over the years as certain aspects of the conference have changed. In the old days, I would get an audio pass. And what was great, up to like 3 or 4 years ago or 5 years ago, you could buy a DVD with recordings of an entire track for not that much money. So you could go as you could get an audio pass, but then go buy all the recordings of the talks from like the main, the programming or the producer's side, the tracks, for I think it's like $100 would get you, or $80 to get you a whole track, or something like that. They changed that policy, and now in order to have access to the talks after the fact, you have to have a GDC Vault subscription, and I think it's pretty pricey, at least immediately after the actual conference is held. So my shrewd money-saving strategy was torpedoed, and since then I upgraded and I got I think the main conference pass, which is one below the super duper, I can walk into any hotel room within 5 blocks kind of pass. But it's nice because sometimes I want to attend talks outside of audio, and it's nice to hear some perspectives from writers or producers. So that's what I've been doing.
Yeah, that's
cool.
What about you, Vince?
Yeah, I've done a couple of different passes. I think last year I actually did some pass switching. So I switched between an all access pass and an expo pass with another guy at work. So switch stuff around, and that actually tends to be a pretty good way to do things if you're a part of a group. So, there's going to be a session here I definitely want to check out. Mind if I have the all access pass for that? And they're like, sure, yeah, and we're going to wander around for other things at that time. By far the best way to do it is to do the speaker thing. And I'm actually going to be a speaker at GDC this year, so that's kind of cool.
Nice. What are you going to be talking?
Well, I'm going to be hanging out with a couple other people like Dred McDonald, Jess Curry. We're actually doing an audio micro talk session, which is pretty cool because I remember for a few years I had been thinking that all the other disciplines had either rants or micro talks that they had done in previous years. Like even game journalism, they had this micro talk rant session. Wait a minute, audio hasn't? And I remember floating around this idea around to various people, and it turns out, there were other people that had that idea in the audio zeitgeist, and so decided to team up on that, and so going to be speaking about some audio stuff at GDC in this micro talk format.
Now, what day are you going to be speaking?
I don't think the schedule is totally out yet, but they did. The actual session is confirmed. It's actually on the GDC site, but we're not sure exactly which day it's going to be.
Oh, gotcha. And what days are you guys going up for GDC?
Well, I'm going to be there the whole week, so yep.
So you're going. Wow, that's a massive week. And what hotel are you staying? No, I'm kidding.
Ha!
What's your room?
Ha! Yeah,
what
right.
room number do you have? Yeah, that would be funny.
No. Actually, I'm probably going to be doing the thing where I'm commuting from Oakland.
Are you really?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think one thing that I've learned over the years at GDC is that it's good to do stuff after hours. You don't really need to do things that are after hours. So, or maybe I'm just sort of a boring stick in the mud. But
I disagree.
Yeah.
Mike and I were out all night, weren't we, Mike? Just constantly.
Frequently. I think there was one night I wussed out and you had some horrible 3 a.m. pizza experience that I wasn't part of. But
oh my God, I got to talk about the pizza experience, don't I? That was so fun. Yeah, we decided to. Well, Mike, didn't you come back with us and then we went out? So we met a guy.
I don't think I was there for whatever you did. I went with you to angry Chinese food, but not the weird pizza.
That's true. I mean, we're covering ground we've already covered before. But when you go to GDC, you have to go to the House of. What's it called? House of Hunan? House of
Hunan.
House of something. I even bought a shirt because the lady is particularly fun to serve you food. She kind of gives you a hard time and throws things. And I've told the story before, but I'm going to tell it again. My first time there, she looked around the table all angrily at us and said, "Does anybody here have a peanut allergy?" And when we said no, she said, "Okay." And she went and just started giving us food no matter what we ordered. It didn't matter. She didn't care. I imagine, how do we pay this, this bill? You didn't even ask us to be concerned about the price. Maybe everything's the same price. I don't really know, but I just thought that was pretty funny. So, does anybody in the chat room know? I'm not looking at the chat room right now. Did they name it? Because it's important to go there.
Oh, man. No, I don't see it.
I want to say it's the House of Hunan.
I'll look it up. I'll see if I can find it in my photo library.
Yeah. Anyway, so we went there, but here's the story. So we came back from wherever we were, and it was super, super early in the morning, like 1 or maybe 1:30, maybe later than that. And we were walking into our hotel. I don't know if Mike was with us at the time. I know that Bobby Arlaskis was with us from, oh my God, Gleek. And so we saw this guy also walking into the front door. And we were like, oh, he's obviously a GDCer. So we said, "Hey, man, how you doing?" And he's like, "Pretty good." A British guy working at Nintendo, but in Japan. And we said, we're not ready to wrap up the night. He was like, "Me either." And so we decided to search out pizza at like 2 a.m. in San Francisco. I don't recommend this. There was one point at which we were walking down. What's that main drag? Is it called? I want to call Marsh Street, but I was
Market, right?
Market. Thank you. I was in San Luis Obispo recently, and their main drag is Marsh. And so we were walking down Market, and he goes, I know where to get pizza. It's right down this road, and it's a cross street to Market. That was just, it was death in an alleyway because we were not going to survive the gauntlet of getting to the pizza joint from Market Street.
Huh.
And all three of us stopped and we looked and we're like, "Oh, this isn't going to be good." You can just see people lining that road, and it just looked dangerous and crazy. And so the guy, who I want to say his name, but I was actually looking for him I've connected with him on LinkedIn, but I can't remember his name right now because I want to tell him, I'll see you at GDC. So I'm going to need some more time to find him because I can't remember. I remember he had a hyphenated last name. But anyway, he just kind of took off with this this bravado of just, nobody's messing with me, and he just started heading right for the pizza joint. And we were behind him and we were like, "Okay, let's just follow him because either we need to follow him to keep him alive, or if we don't follow him, we're going to die." It's one of those trade-offs, and so we just followed him through this, and nobody messed with us, not a single one. We got to the pizza joint, pulled in immediately, and I joke you not, that there were people freshly outside smoking something illegal, getting completely crazy, and the people who ran the pizza joint were the nicest group of it was a family, and just a nice group of people open at that hour serving pizza, gave us a killer pizza. We ran out of there like the wimps that we are, jumping over legs that were in the way, and just headed with our little box of pizza that seemed to take forever to bake because we were just so nervous. Oh my God, what an experience! So we survived at 2 a.m. pizza or 3 a.m. pizza in San Francisco on Market Street off of Cross Street. Got back to my hotel, chugged down the pizza, went to bed, got up the next day for GDC. These are and actually it was funny, the next day at GDC we were getting hit up for breakfasts really early. I'm thinking I just went to bed, but that's what's awesome about GDC, right? You've got these adventures at 3 a.m. for pizza. You've got breakfast at 7 a.m. with people who want to see you. Go do it, man. GDC is one of the funnest times ever.
It is a good time.
Well, I want to wrap up, but I also want to announce our next contest. So we're going to hold a contest as soon as I find this graphic, because I am really, really far behind on getting this taken care of. Hold on, guys. I'm just going to put it like that. Here we go. We're going to hit this so I can hit save, and we're going to present this on the screen as soon as I export it. We're doing this live. This is what happens when you're live. Sometimes things are not prepared, and you need to prepare them on the way. So we're going to announce our next giveaway from our sponsor, Isotope. Thank you very much. The Isotope item that we are giving away is going to be Nectar. And the reason I wasn't prepared is because Nectar is an awesome piece of software that I use a lot, like Melodyne, or like what's the other one? I don't use the other one. What's the other one?
Autotune?
Like eVocal and
Autotune. I use Nectar more than I use Autotune, and I use Melodyne as well.
And I think the thing is, Nectar is faster. Nectar is a lot faster. I think Melodyne is actually quite good. It's really good. You could do really powerful stuff with it. Like, I've actually used Melodyne for dealing with instruments that were recorded not too well in an orchestral setting. It's like, okay, let me fix that French horn solo. But but if I'm recording voice actors, Nectar does pretty much everything that I need it to do, and it will do it in the first pass. So, oh right, cool. We need to do singing, and we've got a voice actor that's not a fantastic trained singer. Well, okay, let me just get this thing set up. Boom. And
Nectar is a great piece of software. That's our next giveaway. And I have the art up. Thank you, everybody, for dealing with us for being a live show and not necessarily always prepared. So get on Twitter and type a little something, and then make sure that you add at Game Audio Hour and at Isotope Inc. Make sure that you have hashtag Nectar in the tweet as well. And we will be able to search on hashtag Nectar to see who all has submitted, and we'll be able to bring it up in our random number generator within 2 weeks. That's another thing I want to say. I'm going to leave this up on the screen. I know you can't see me, but our poll for this is 2 weeks from now, and here's why. Next Monday is MLK Day, and so we'll be observing that amazing holiday and very important holiday. So we will not have a show next week, but also, we're going to be presenting in the next 2 weeks a poll. Sorry, I'm losing the word, guys. Can you help me with that? Survey, thank you, that Alex put together. Just kind of getting your information about what you want to see on the show, subjects you want us to cover. Also, is this a bad hour? We've never thought to ask if 6 p.m. on Monday is a bad time to do the show. So we're going to spend 2 weeks on this one before we announce the winner. So you've got 2 weeks to get in a tweet that includes at Game Audio Hour, at Isotope Inc., and has the hashtag Nectar. But again, don't start it with any of the ats, because what happens is that just comes to us, and we could use a little bit of the lovin'. So go ahead and write a little something in front of it so that people will see that we're doing very special things, and we will be giving away a copy of Nectar 2.
So why don't we recap all the requirements of this tweet, just because it's been kind of scattered across the last few minutes. So it's got to be a tweet that does, first it has to start with something that's not a hashtag or a link to someone with an @ sign, right? It just has to start with text, preferably something complimentary. Then somewhere in the body of that tweet, you took the graphic off, but you have to have Isotope Inc., @ sign Isotope Inc., right? And @ sign, sorry, ampersand, Game Audio Hour. Okay. So those two things have to be in your tweet, but neither of them should start the tweet. So start the tweet with, here are some things I love more than my own life.
Mike, I think you made it more confusing.
No, well, all right, that might be true, but I've made it more entertaining. And then finally, make sure you have the hashtag Nectar, and
yes.
you're all good.
Yes. To recap, you could put a single letter. I don't care. Just say boo, B-O-O. I don't care. Just don't start with an @ either one of these ats. There you go.
Don't say that you don't care. You'll get all sorts of stuff there. I personally recommend the word thanks because that is an appropriate word for many different situations.
Yes, you're right. You're right. You're right. I will. I often say I don't care and I pay the price later. But and also thanks can be abbreviated THX, which is my favorite sign off. So yes, write something, then include the ats, then include the hashtag, and you will be entered to win next Nectar 2. And also we will be announcing on Twitter when we're going to release the survey, which will be coming very shortly. We just have to finish up a couple things. Guys,
woohoo!
I think we covered everything. I think
we did.
That was a tough one to get through because my brain was a little bit meldy because I'm a little bit bummed out. I gotta be honest, but I want to finish this show by saying two things. First of all, thanks Chatties for being on the show. Secondly, congrats to Vince, who is engaged to be married. That's awesome.
Okay, all right. Thank you for the congratulations.
Oh, that's
it's not really game audio related, so I hesitate to bring that up.
You are modest and a gentleman, but it's an important life event, and I'm happy that you're going through it. It's a wonderful thing.
Thank you.
Yeah,
congratulations.
I'm
looking forward to it.
Kind of makes up for the whole Bowie thing.
Yeah. Maybe a little bit. Oh, I do want to. I'm going to put both of you guys on the spot here, but there was a question asked in the chat about whether we're going to do a live show at GDC, and I just want to throw that out there. Even though it is 3 months from now, we're going to do one, right? We're going to do one.
Yes, we're going to do it. Last year's went really well. We had really high viewership for that show. It was one of our highest viewed shows, and it was a shambles because I did not plan as well as I should have. But, that's the way you learn things. So this year I've already got a few things planned, and we're going to kind of have a practice run at NAMM, where we're not going to do a live show, but we will be dealing with some new camera gear. We're going to be dealing with some audio gear and trying to capture some interviews and get you guys some reviews of some products that we think are good for game audio. So we're going to kind of have a practice run at NAMM that we're going to bring with us to GDC and put on a live show. Absolutely. I need to secure the area for the live show. I'm staying at the Palomar, which is no longer called the Palomar, and I'm hoping to get the 5th floor bar, but since it's been bought by another company, I don't know if they even have the 5th floor bar anymore. But they used to have this really cool swanky joint up there that you could use. So I've got to get those things switched, situated, and sussed out is what I was going to say. But I'll let you know as soon as I do. But to answer the question, there will definitely be a live show. Maybe we'll just go back to the coffee house like last year.
Recall that we didn't actually successfully broadcast at the coffee house.
We
hotel.
We audibled. We went to the hotel.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Let me clarify. We tried to do the coffee house, but it didn't end up working out.
We'll figure it out.
Maybe we'll figure it out, but there's definitely going to be a live show, and please come out. And also, there are other live shows that Damien's putting on at the coffee house every day. So go to that place. Do you guys remember what that coffee house was called?
Oh,
it was on 7th, just a few clicks south of the Good Hotel, I think. Like it was right near there, right?
Yeah. Damien and Anton were putting stuff on there. That's a great morning to GDC is to go to that. I often struggle between that and going to breakfast and just seeing all those people over at breakfast. But yeah, check that out if we're not there. But we're going to be somewhere. We'll let you guys know. We're definitely doing a live show.
Sight Glass Coffee. That's what it was.
Sight Glass. Yes. Well done. All right, fellas, I'm going to see you off. I'm going to go eat chicken parm tonight rather than spaghetti. It's a pretty special night.
Nice. Excellent.
Vince, congratulations, and thank you, Chatties, for joining the show. And I'm going to hit it out. Thank you, Isotope,
Okay.
for sponsoring. Bye.